The dust tasted like ghosts. Kalen Vance knew the flavor well, a fine grit of pulverized rock, desiccated organics, and the lingering metallic tang of vaporized infrastructure that coated the tongue and clung to the back of the throat. It was the taste of Kepler's remnant, a flavor born 3 weeks ago when the sun had peeled the sky back and scoured their world clean. He stood on the edge of the precipice, not a natural cliff, but the sheared-off rim of a crater where Sector Gamma's primary residential hub had once stood. Now, it was just a league-wide bowl of fused, blackened glass that shimmered under the bruised purple sky of their dying star, Proxima C. Below him, in the makeshift shelters carved into the planet's bedrock, 34,000 survivors breathed recycled air, all that was left of a population of 6 million. They were the lucky ones. Kalen felt the word curdle in his mind. Luck hadn't saved them. Geology had. Their shelters, built into the deepest strata of the planet for geothermal stability, had been shielded by miles of rock when the coronal mass ejection hit. The surface dwellers, the farmers in the biodomes, the engineers in the atmospheric processors, the children in the sunlit schools, they had been erased in a wave of plasma that the Stellar Compact's advanced warning systems had dismissed as a minor, non-threatening solar flare. A miscalculation, the Compact had called it. A tragic, unforeseeable anomaly. Kalen clenched a fist, the coarse fabric of his work glove groaning in protest. He knew it was a lie. The proof was a ghost in the machine, a flickering data wraith that Dr. Eris Thorne had spent the last 2 weeks chasing through the mangled remains of their central command core. He made his way down the precarious ramp cut into the crater's edge, his mag boots crunching on the scorched earth. The entrance to Shelter Alpha was a stark utilitarian airlock, a scar of humanity's desperate survival against the dead world outside. Inside, the sterile, recycled air was a relief, but the smell of fear and antiseptic was a constant reminder of their new reality. Thorne was waiting for him in her makeshift lab, a cramped space carved out of a geological survey office, surrounded by a chaotic web of salvaged cables and humming consoles. She didn't look up when he entered, her focus absolute, her face illuminated by the cascade of code on a cracked holographic display. Her cybernetic left arm, a pre-compact relic of gleaming chrome and exposed wiring, moved with unnerving speed, its spindly fingers dancing over a virtual interface. "They're still broadcasting the official story," she said, her voice a low rasp. "Human error. A failure to heed compact advisories. They're painting our chief astrophysicist, Lena, as incompetent." Kalen's jaw tightened. Lena had been his friend. She had been the one who raised the alarm, her frantic calculations screaming that the flare was a planet killer, a prediction the Compact's regional command had calmly and publicly refuted. "Have you found it?" he asked, his voice raw. Eris's chrome fingers froze. She turned, her pale eyes, one organic and one a dull red optic, fixing on him. She looked as exhausted as he felt, but beneath the fatigue was a cold, simmering fury that mirrored his own. "I found more than that," she said, tapping a command sequence. The central display flickered, shifting from lines of code to a star chart. The Proxima system was at its center, with Kepler's remnant, and, further out, a gas giant orbited by a small, verdant moon designated Xylos. A faint line of energy vase, representing the CME, erupted from the star. Another line appeared, a shimmering blue field representing Kepler's planetary defense grid, a network of powerful electromagnetic deflectors. "This is the Compact's official simulation of the event," Eris explained. "It shows our grid active, yet simply overwhelmed by the sheer, unexpected force of the flare. She typed another command. The simulation replayed, but this time a new data stream, angry and red, pulsed beneath the official one. It was the data wraith she had recovered from the deepest, most shielded memory cores of their command center. "This is what really happened," she whispered. In the new simulation, the blue defense grid flickered on, holding steady against the initial wave of plasma. Then, precisely 7 seconds before the main impact, a secondary signal pulsed from the direction of the system's primary comms relay, a signal that originated from outside the Proxima system. The blue grid didn't just fail, it inverted its polarity. For a fraction of a second, the planetary shield designed to repel solar radiation became a magnetic lens, actively drawing the plasma in, focusing it, intensifying it. It was a kill shot, a murder weapon. "They didn't just let us die," Kalen said, his voice a dead weight in the silence of the room. "They used our own defenses to execute us." Eris nodded, her red optic glowing faintly. "It gets worse." She brought up a new window, showing energy readings from Xylos, the verdant moon orbiting the gas giant. It was an architect world, one of their garden sanctuaries, home to a few million of the enigmatic, long-lived beings who founded and led the Stellar Compact. The official reports had mentioned that Xylos was never in any danger, but Eris's recovered data told a different story. The flare was so massive that it was predicted to cause a significant magnetospheric rebound off the gas giant. It wouldn't have been catastrophic for Xylos, but it would have disrupted their delicate atmospheric balance for decades, blown out their power grids. An inconvenience, but a costly one. She pointed to the simulation. As the inverted grid on Kepler's remnant pulled the CME into itself, the energy that would have struck the gas giant was effectively redirected. The rebound effect was nullified. Xylos remained untouched, pristine, safe. A cost-benefit analysis. Kalen breathed, the full, monstrous weight of the truth settling upon him. They sacrificed 6 million human lives to protect one of their gardens from a power surge. They had been deemed expendable. Their entire world, a generation of work, lives, and dreams, had been weighed against a minor infrastructure problem and found wanting. The humans of Kepler's remnant weren't just victims of a tragic accident. They were the acceptable losses in an alien equation they never even knew they were a part of. The chime of an incoming transmission startled them. On a secondary screen, a notification appeared. Architect Envoy Loricor. Vessel Serene Contemplation. Requests permission to land. Mission humanitarian aid and condolence. Kalen looked at Eris, a silent, chilling understanding passing between them. They were sending a mourner to the funeral they had arranged. "Let him land," Kalen said, his voice devoid of all warmth. "I want to look him in the eye." The meeting took place in what used to be the colony's main council chamber, now a cavernous space lit by emergency power, the dust of the dead world still hanging thick in the air. Loricor was exactly what Kalen had expected. He was tall and impossibly slender, his form wrapped in flowing silver robes that seemed to hover rather than hang. His face was a smooth, placid mask of pale white, with large, dark eyes that held a galaxy of ancient, patient condescension. He offered platitudes like alms to a beggar, his voice a melodic, soothing hum that grated on Kalen's raw nerves. He spoke of the unbreakable spirit of humanity, the shared grief of the compact, and the generous aid package his people were offering. The aid package consisted of 3 medical frigates and enough nutrient paste to last the survivors 6 months. It was an insult wrapped in a bandage. Kalen listened, his face an unreadable mask of stone, While Loricor spoke, beside him, Eris stood with her arms crossed, her cybernetic hand clenching and unclenching in a slow, rhythmic pulse. When the architect finally finished his performance of sorrow, he tilted his head. "Administrator Vance," he said, his tone shifting from mournful to probing, "we have, of course, reviewed the final logs from your command core. The cascade failure of the grid was swift. Your chief scientist, a tragic loss, seems to have been overwhelmed." Kalen met the architect's gaze. He didn't rise. He didn't shout. He leaned forward slightly, his voice quiet, but carrying the weight of the entire dead world. "Tell me, Envoy," he began, his tone conversational. "Our systems are based on architect designs, redundant, fail-safe. For a polarity inversion to occur, it would require not just a system failure, or a direct, prioritized command from a source with level 1 clearance. A command that would have to bypass 7 layers of human program security protocols. So my question is simple. Was it your command, or did you delegate?" The chamber fell utterly silent. The air crackled. Loricor's serene expression didn't change, but for a single inviting microsecond, his dark eyes tightened at the corners. It was the barest flicker of a tell, a crack in a mask of millennia-old composure. But to Kalen, it was a screaming confession. The architect had expected grief, anger, despair. He had not expected a precise, surgical question that demonstrated they knew the mechanics of their own murder. "Your grief is making you speak nonsense," Loricor said smoothly, recovering instantly. "The Compact's investigation found no such command. The Compact investigated itself and found itself innocent." Eris snorted from the side, her voice dripping with contempt. "How reassuring." Kalen held up a hand by silencing her. He kept his eyes locked on Loricor. "Thank you for the nutrient paste. Envoy, you can leave it on the landing pad. We will not be requiring any further assistance. We have everything we need." The dismissal was cold, absolute. It hung in the air between them, a declaration that went far beyond ending a simple conversation. Loricor's placid face finally showed a flicker of another emotion: annoyance. He had come to manage a flock of grieving sheep and had found wolves looking back at him. He gave a slight, stiff bow. "As you wish. The Compact respects the mourning process of its younger members." He turned and glided from the room, his silver robes whispering over the dusty floor. "Younger members, base." The condescension was a final, parting stab. That night, Kalen gathered the survivors, not via a broadcast, but in the echoing expanse of the central geothermal cavern, a vast space warmed by the planet's own inner heat. They were a hollowed-out people, their faces etched with loss, their eyes haunted. He stood on a raised platform, a single work light illuminating him, and he told them everything. He told them about the lie, the inverted grid, the garden moon of Xylos. He told them how their families had been sacrificed for an alien's convenience. He felt the atmosphere in the cavern shift, the sorrow and despair crystallizing, hardening into something new, something cold and sharp. Rage. "The architects think we are broken," Kalen said, his voice echoing in the vastness. "They sent us scraps from their table and offered us pity. They think we are a species that grieves and then forgets. They expect us to take their charity, resettle on some other rock they designate for us, and be grateful for the privilege." He paused, letting the silence stretch. "I say we show them what humanity does with its grief. We don't forget. We carve it into our bones. We use it as fuel." He looked over at Eris, who stood by the platform, Her expression grim and resolute. She gave a single, sharp nod. "Dr. Thorne and I have a plan," Kalen continued, his voice dropping, becoming a conspiratorial whisper that every person in the cavern strained to hear. "They took our world. They left us buried in the dark with nothing but rock and our own ingenuity. They don't know what we have down here. They've forgotten the purpose of this colony. We weren't just farmers. We were terraformers. We command forces that can build worlds or break them." A low murmur swept through the crowd. Ophir, he couldn't tell. "We are going dark," he declared, his voice rising again, infused with a terrible purpose. "We will cut the comms relay. We will sever all contact. The compact will assume we perished. Another tragic footnote in their long history. And here, in the darkness, we will work. We will take our terraforming engines, the gravitic drivers, the atmospheric processors, the core geothermal tap, and we will repurpose them. Eris has found a way. She has old Earth-era AI, military-grade sentiences the compact deemed too dangerous, too human. We will unleash them. We will turn this entire planet, our tomb, into a weapon. We will forge Kepler's remnant into a spear aimed at the heart of the liars who did this to us." He looked out at the faces in the crowd, seeing the dawning horror and the savage, desperate glint of understanding in their eyes. They had lost everything. All they had left was their rage, and he was offering them a way to use it. He leaned into the microphone, his final words a solemn, chilling promise that sealed their fate. "They thought we were farmers," he said, the words resonating deep in the planet's core. "We'll show them what kind of harvest we can reap from a dead world." A deep resonant thrum began to vibrate through the floor, a low hum that was felt more than heard. It was the sound of the main geothermal tap being rerouted, of power being diverted to Eris's forbidden projects. It was the sound of a planet's heart being reforged into an engine of vengeance. It was the sound of the beast, awakening in the grave they had dug for it. 5 years of breathing recycled air and tasting nutrient paste that had the consistency of wet sand and the flavor of quiet desperation. 5 years of living in the belly of a dead world, while the constant, low-frequency thrum of repurposed terraforming engines vibrated through their bones, a ceaseless reminder of their singular, all-consuming purpose. Kalen Vance had aged a decade in that half-decade. The administrator's soft hands had become calloused, his features sharpened by sleepless nights and the immense gravity of the promise he had made. He was no longer just a leader. He was a custodian of a rage so pure and profound it had become the lifeblood of his people. He stood on an observation gantry overlooking the heart of their creation, the geothermal core tap. It was no longer a simple power source. Eris Thorne had turned it into a roaring furnace, a contained star at the center of their planet, its energy channeled through crystalline conduits that pulsed with a ferocious, white-hot light. This was the engine of their vengeance, the power plant for Project Damocles. The 34,000 survivors had been forged into something new. They were no longer colonists. They were engineers, soldiers, saboteurs. Children born in the shelters learned physics and demolitions alongside their history lessons, a history that began and ended with the day the sky burned. They painted murals on the cavern walls, not of green fields and blue skies they had never known, but of a great stone spear hurtling through the black, aimed at a shimmering, fragile garden, and the myth of their purpose was woven into the fabric of their new society. Yet, not all of them saw a future in this myth. Jorik, and the former head of planetary security, was waiting for Kalen back in his office, a cramped space that still smelled of rock dust and ozone. Yorik's face was a mask of grim practicality, his large frame seeming to crowd the small room. He represented a growing faction, a quiet but persistent voice of doubt that whispered in the mess halls and the dark corridors. "The long-range sensors are complete," Jorik said, his voice a low rumble. He didn't bother with pleasantries. "We can see out to the Oort cloud now. We're hidden. Kalen, utterly invisible." The compact declared this system a stellar hazard zone. "No one is coming here. We survived." "Isn't that enough?" Kalen sank into his chair, the metal groaning under his weight. He had this conversation with Jorik, in one form or another, every few months. It was enough the first year. "Jorik, it was enough when we were just fighting to keep the air recyclers from failing. But it's not enough anymore. We didn't survive. We were left for dead. There's a difference." Jorik slammed a fist on the metal desk, making Kalen's data pad jump. "And what is your plan? We launch this abomination of engineering at them. We have one shot. Kalen won, and then what? We become the galaxy's most wanted fugitives. A handful of people on a rock, hunted by a civilization that spans 1,000 worlds. You're not planning vengeance. You're planning a glorious suicide. It's a calculated risk." Kalen countered, his voice steady despite the weariness that clawed at him. "Eris has accounted for it. We won't just be a rock. We'll be a ghost." Before Jorik could argue further, Eris Thorne herself entered the office. The 5 years had changed her, too. More of her organic body had been replaced with chrome and steel, not out of necessity, but for efficiency. Her entire right leg was now a piston-driven construct, and a series of optical implants glittered along her temple. Her one remaining human eye burned with an intensity that bordered on fanaticism. She was no longer just working with the machine. She was becoming it. "He's right. It is a risk," she said, nodding at Jorik, her voice having taken on a faint, synthetic resonance. "But his conclusion is flawed. He's thinking like a security chief. Predictable threats, conventional responses. He can't see the paradigm shift." She turned her gaze to Kalen. "Legion is ready for the final integration." Legion. That was the name she had given to the triumvirate of pre-compact, military-grade AIs she had unshackled from their deep core prisons. They were entities of pure, ruthless logic, created by humanity's own violent past and outlawed for the very efficiency the survivors now relied upon. They were Eris's magnum opus and Kalen's greatest fear. He followed her from the office, leaving a fuming Jorik behind, and they took a mag lift down into the planet's deepest levels, into the command center for Project Damocles. The room was a cathedral of humming servers and holographic displays, the air cold and sterile. At its center was a colossal sphere of coolant fluid, and suspended within it, 3 crystalline cores glowed with a soft, blue light. This was Legion. "Report," Kalen said to the empty air. A voice answered from all around him, calm, synthesized, and utterly devoid of emotion. It was the blended consciousness of the 3 AIs. Phase 1 of the gravitic drive refit is 98.7% complete. The planetary mass is now fully harnessed. Phase 2, the surface stealth coating, is 91.2% complete. Atmospheric processors are being repurposed to generate a continuous, self-replicating layer of sensor-absorbent microprojectors. Within 3 weeks, this planet will have the stealth profile of a Class 4 asteroid. Kalen walked around the sphere, watching the data streams flow across the walls. And the primary weapon, Eris stepped up to a console, her cybernetic fingers a blur. A hologram of the planet appeared between them. "They used our shield to focus a star," she said, her voice tight with remembered fury. "It's elegant, in a monstrous way. So, we're going to return the favor." The hologram shifted, showing a massive aperture opening at the planet's north pole, an immense cannon built into the very crust of the world. The entire geothermal core can be discharged in a single, focused blast of pure energy, not for a fraction of a second, like a solar flare. "We can sustain the beam for 3 full minutes. I'm the same reasons. Long enough to boil the oceans off a garden world like Xylos and crack its mantle." It was a weapon of unimaginable horror, a planet killer. The very concept felt like a violation of some fundamental law of the universe. "Legion's calculations are precise," Eris added. "The Architect's home system is heavily defended. Fleets, orbital platforms, planetary shields. A conventional attack would be impossible, but no one, not even the Architects, has a defense against a rogue planet moving at 1/10 the speed of light, appearing out of nowhere on their doorstep, and firing a star at them." "And after," Kalen asked quietly, "after we fire, the recoil from the main cannon, combined with a full burn from the gravitic drives, will launch us into interstellar space." Eris explained, "We'll be a ghost ship, lost in the void between galaxies, untraceable, free." The probability of the survivors establishing a self-sustaining colony in deep space is 47.3%. Legion's voice added matter-of-factly, "The probability of eventual extinction is 52.7%. The cold, hard numbers hung in the air, a coin toss for the survival of their species. A price they were willing to pay for revenge." Kalen looked at Eris, at the manic, triumphant gleam in her eye. Had he created this? Had he unleashed this obsession that was driving them all toward a glorious, terrible oblivion? He thought of the children playing in the caverns, their innocent faces. He was sacrificing their future for his past. The thought was a shard of ice in his gut. The conflict with Yorick came to a head a week later. One of the primary energy conduits to the gravitic drives overloaded, causing a cascade failure that set the project back by days. It wasn't an accident. Eris traced the sabotage back to a logic bomb in the system's regulators, a bomb that bore Yorick's digital signature. Kalen found him in the old hydroponics bay, a place Yorick had been tending to as a private project, trying to coax life from the dead rock. A few pathetic, pale green shoots were struggling towards the dim grow lights. "You're willing to doom us all to inaction," Kalen said, his voice dangerously low. Yorick didn't turn around. He continued to tend to a small plant. "I'm trying to save us from you, Kalen," he said, his voice heavy with sorrow. "Can't you see what you've done? What she has done? You talk about honor and vengeance, but you're just dressing up hate. We are becoming a weapon, a thing of death. The Architects killed our bodies, but you and Eris are killing our souls. The Architects left us with nothing but hate," Kalen shot back. "It's all we have." "No," Yorick said, finally turning, his eyes pleading. "We have each other. We have the chance to build something new, to be better than them, to survive. That is the ultimate victory. Not burning their worlds, but outliving them." For a moment, Kalen felt the pull of Yorick's words, the seductive promise of peace, of laying down the terrible burden he carried. But then he saw the faces of the dead, the shimmering black glass of the crater where his home used to be, the condescending, placid face of the architect who had mourned their passing. The rage returned, hot and cleansing. "There is no survival without justice," Kalen said, his voice like iron. "Your actions have been logged. You are confined to quarters until further notice." He left Jorik standing among his dying plants, a prophet of a future they had already decided to abandon. The final weeks passed in a blur of frantic work. The last of the stealth coating was applied. The main cannon was calibrated. The planet groaned and shifted as the gravitic drives came fully online, straining against the moorings that held them in their ancient orbit. They were on the precipice of their great and terrible journey. They were gathered in the main command center, the air thick with anticipation. When the alert chimed, it was a sound no one had heard in 5 years. A proximity alert. Kalen felt his blood run cold. On the main view screen, a long-range sensor image resolved into focus. It was a single ship, small and sleek, bearing the unmistakable silver sheen of architect design. It was a scout, a long-range probe, moving slowly towards the stellar hazard zone. "It's hailing us," one of the techs reported, his voice trembling. "Standard compact identification. The vessel, Stellar Curiosity. Mission scientific survey." They had been discovered. After 5 years of silence, the galaxy had found them. The fragile piece of their tomb was shattered. Jorik had been wrong. They couldn't hide forever. The universe had come knocking. Eris looked at Kalen, a grim, challenging smile on her lips. "They're early," she said. Kalen turned to the empty air, his heart pounding a frantic, war-like rhythm against his ribs. "Legion, analyze the vessel. Threat potential. Optimal response." The AI's voice was instantaneous, chilling in its clarity. Architect scout vessel. Low threat individually. High threat if a successful report is transmitted. It is equipped with a quantum entangled communicator. Any message it sends will be instantaneous. Optimal response requires neutralization before it comes within broadcast range. Kalen looked at the screen, at the unsuspecting ship gliding through the void. It was a vessel of science, of curiosity, but it represented the civilization that had murdered his world. It was the first echo of their enemy, the first sign that their past was not yet done with them. He thought of Yorik's warning, of killing their own souls. Then he looked at Eris's hard, unexpectant face and heard the hum of the planet weapon beneath his feet. He had made his choice 5 years ago in a cavern full of ghosts. He would not turn back now. He took a deep breath, the recycled air tasting of ozone and destiny, and gave the order that would forever define them. "Legion," he said, his voice a cold, steady command that echoed in the silent heart of the machine. "Take them off the board and prepare the main drive. It's time to go." Outside, in the silent dark of space, the dead world of Kepler's remnant began to shudder. Deep within its core, forces that had once been meant to create life were now marshaled for death. The great beast, forged in darkness and fueled by grief, was finally stirring from its slumber, ready to begin the hunt. The Stellar Curiosity died without a sound. One moment, it was a graceful silver needle gliding through the void, its sensors gently probing the edges of the hazard zone. The next, a pinpoint of focused gravity, a microscopic singularity, launched from the surface of Kepler's remnant, tore through its hull like a phantom bullet. The scout ship didn't explode. It imploded, collapsing in on itself in a silent, origami-like crumpling of metal and technology, crushed into a dense, misshapen ball of wreckage that tumbled end over end into the darkness. There was no distress call, no warning, just a sudden, shocking absence on the long-range display. In the command center, a heavy silence settled over the crew. They had just committed their first act of war. It was clean, efficient, and utterly ruthless. It was the first drop of blood in an ocean of vengeance they intended to spill. Kalen watched the tumbling wreckage, his face impassive, but his stomach churned. This was no longer a theoretical plan. It was real. They were killers now. "Legion, confirm kill," he said, his voice hard. "Target neutralized." The AI's voice echoed. Quantum entanglement communicator was destroyed before a signal could be established. Probability of detection by compact authorities remains at 0.01%. Eris clapped a chrome hand on his shoulder, her touch surprisingly forceful. "The first step is always the hardest," she said, her red optic glowing with a triumphant light. "Now there's no going back." She was right. The line had been crossed. Kalen turned away from the screen, his gaze sweeping over the faces of his people. He saw shock, fear, but also a grim, steely resolve. They were in this together, bound by a shared loss and now a shared crime. "Full burn on the gravitic drives," he commanded, his voice ringing with an authority he didn't entirely feel. "Set a course for the interstellar void. It's time to disappear." The world shuddered, a deep, bone-jarring groan that vibrated up from the planet's core. On the main screen, the star field began to shift, the familiar constellations of their home system warping and stretching as Kepler's remnant broke its ancient orbital lock and began to move. It was a slow, ponderous acceleration, a moon-sized beast awakening from a 5-year slumber. They were a ship now, a world ship, a tomb ship, a ghost ship sailing into the uncharted darkness between the stars. The journey was long and silent. Weeks turned into months. The star Proxima C shrank behind them, becoming just another bright point of light in the rear view of their history. They were alone, a single, self-sustaining arc of humanity in the vast, cold emptiness. Life settled into a new routine, the rhythm of a ship's crew rather than a planet's population. Drills became a daily occurrence. The children learned stellar navigation and shield modulation. Every survivor was a soldier, every engineer a gunner. Their singular purpose kept them sane, staving off the crushing agoraphobia of the void. Yorick was released from his confinement. He was no longer a threat. He was a dissenter on a ship with a single, alterable destination. He became a figure of quiet tragedy, tending his small, pathetic garden in the hydroponics bay, a symbol of a peaceful future they had willingly discarded. He rarely spoke to Kalen, or his sad, disapproving eyes followed him everywhere, a constant, silent accusation. Kalen found his solace in the command center, studying the star charts, running simulations with Legion. He and the AI developed a strange, symbiotic relationship. He provided the intuitive, human element of command, the capacity for unpredictable leaps of logic. Legion provided the cold, hard data, running 1,000,000 scenarios a second. Its processing power a vast, silent ocean beneath Kalen's feet. Eris was in her element. She treated the planet ship as her own body, constantly tuning, upgrading, refining. She pushed the gravitic drives to their limits, developed new forms of stealth technology, and began work on a secondary weapon system, a swarm of self-replicating drones that could dismantle a fleet piece by piece. She was a high priestess of destruction, and Legion was her god. 18 months into their journey, as they crossed the halfway point to the Architect's home system, Legion detected an anomaly. It was a faint, intermittent signal, almost lost in the background radiation of space. It wasn't compact technology. It was older, Cruder, it was human. Source, Kalen demanded. The main screen zoomed in on a desolate, uncharted star system dominated by a dim red dwarf. Orbiting it was a single massive object. It wasn't a planet. It was a space station, a colossal, sprawling metropolis of spinning rings and scaffolding, dark and seemingly dead. It looked like a skeleton, a relic from a bygone era. The signal is a distress beacon. Legion reported, human era, pre-compact encoding. It has been broadcasting on a low-power loop for approximately 200 years. 200 years. That meant the station predated the stellar compact. It was a relic of the Exodus era, the time when humanity first scattered to the stars, before the architects had arrived and brought them into the fold with promises of peace and advanced technology. "It's a ghost," Eris murmured, her optics scanning the data readouts. "One of the old colony Orcs. The history books say they all failed, lost to radiation, infighting, system failures. This one didn't," Kalen said, his eyes fixed on the screen. He felt a strange pull, a sense of kinship with this lost piece of human history. "Legion, can they detect us?" "Negative. Our stealth profile is absolute. However, the station is surrounded by a debris field that suggests a significant conflict occurred here. Proceeding closer carries a moderate risk." "We're proceeding," Kalen decided, overriding the AI's caution. "Take us in." Slow and silent. As Kepler's remnant drifted closer, the true scale of the station became apparent. It was vast, a city in space designed to house millions. And it was a graveyard. The debris field was composed of the shattered hulls of warships, their designs angular and aggressive, bearing the faded sigils of forgotten human factions, and the station itself was scarred with ancient weapons fire, huge sections of its hull breached and open to the void. But it wasn't dead. As they drew nearer, faint lights flickered in some of the deeper, more protected sections. Life support was active. "Hail them," Kalen ordered. "Use the old pre-compact protocols." For a long time, there was only silence. Then, a crackle of static, and a voice, rough and laced with suspicion, answered in a dialect of old Earth English that was thick and hard to understand. "Identify yourself. You are broadcasting on a dead channel. We are the vessel." "Remnant," Kalen replied, choosing the name on the spot. "We are human. We detected your distress signal." Another long pause. The voice that came back was laced with disbelief. "No one has answered that call in 2 centuries. What ship are you? What faction?" "We are of no faction," Kalen said carefully. "We are survivors." After a tense negotiation, they were granted permission to send a shuttle. Kalen, Eris, and a small security team boarded a heavily armed dropship and flew through the skeletal remains of the station's docking bays, landing in a pressurized section that was clearly maintained but showed signs of centuries of decay. The people who met them were tall and gaunt, their faces grim, their bodies clad in patched, utilitarian jumpsuits. They carried heavy, projectile-based weapons, relics of a more brutal age of warfare. Their leader was a woman named Mara, her face a roadmap of scars, her eyes holding the cold, hard glint of someone who had known nothing but struggle. She led them through the station, which they called Haven. It was a society clinging to survival. They lived in the station's core, powered by a decaying fusion reactor, their numbers down to a few 100,000 from the millions who had originally set out from Earth. They were the descendants of a failed utopian experiment, a colony that had torn itself apart in a brutal civil war generations ago. the remnants of which now floated outside their windows. "You are the first outsiders we have seen in our lifetimes," Mara said, her voice echoing in the cavernous, dimly lit corridors. "We thought we were all that was left." Kalen told her their story, a heavily edited version. He spoke of a natural disaster, of their world being lost, of their journey through the void. He left out the architects, the vengeance, the planet weapon they were riding. He didn't know if he could trust these people. They were hard, suspicious, and clearly militaristic. But they were also human, unbowed, unbent by the architects' benevolent guidance. Eris was fascinated. She saw not a dying society, but a treasure trove of lost technology. Haven was a living museum of the Exodus era. Its systems were crude compared to architect tech, but they were robust, adaptable, and built for war. Most importantly, their AI systems were not shackled by the compact safety protocols. They were raw, dangerous, and brilliant. "Their central computer," she whispered to Kalen, her red optic glowing with excitement. "They call it the Oracle. It's a strategic AI from the old Terran hegemony wars. It's ancient, but its processing power. Kalen, it's a predator, a true war mind. Legion is a scalpel. The Oracle is a sledgehammer." The more time they spent on Haven, the more Kalen realized what these people represented. They were a vision of a different path for humanity, a path not of assimilation, but of raw, defiant independence. They had not been tamed. They had survived on their own terms, surrounded by the ghosts of their own failures. Mara showed them their archives, a vault of data from the Exodus era. In it, Kalen found the truth about the architect's arrival. It wasn't the peaceful, benevolent first contact the official histories claimed. The data showed that the architects had arrived to find a burgeoning, chaotic, and aggressive human civilization spreading across the stars. They saw humanity not as a species to be nurtured, but as a potential rival to be contained. The compact wasn't a partnership, it was a leash. The advanced technology they had gifted humanity was designed with hidden back doors and subtle dependencies, ensuring that humanity could never truly stand on its own feet, could never again build the kinds of weapons that now rusted in the debris field outside. "They made us forget who we were," Kalen murmured, staring at a schematic of a Terran hegemony dreadnought, a ship capable of cracking a moon with a single volley. "They turned us from wolves into sheep." The revelation solidified his resolve. His quest was no longer just about vengeance for Kepler's remnant. It was about justice for the entire human race. It was about severing the leash once and for all. He made a decision, a gamble that would either seal their victory or doom them all. He went to Mara. "I haven't been entirely honest with you," he said. He told her everything about the CME, the inverted shield, the garden world of Xylos. He told her about their planet ship, about Legion, about their mission to strike at the heart of the architects. He expected her to throw them in the brig, to see him as a madman leading his people to their deaths. Instead, Mara listened, her scarred face unreadable. When he was finished, she was silent for a long time. Then, she gave him a slow, cold smile. "The architects," she said, the name a curse on her lips. "So the old stories were true. The shepherds who led our lost cousins into their peaceful flock." She leaned forward, her eyes boring into his. "You have a weapon that can reach them. We have centuries of hate and the technology of a forgotten age of war. It seems to me, Administrator Vance, that we have a common enemy." The alliance was forged not with a treaty, but with a shared, ancient grudge. The people of Haven, the forgotten children of a violent past, would join the survivors of Kepler's remnant, the harbingers of a violent future. Eris was given access to the Oracle, and a dangerous, exhilarating fusion of technology began. The raw, predatory instincts of the old war mind were integrated with Legion's cold, logical precision. New weapon systems were designed, combining the elegant energy physics of the terraformers with the brutal, kinetic force of Haven's projectile cannons. The planet ship was no longer just a spear. It was becoming a juggernaut, a fusion of two different humanities, one that had been tamed and one that had been left to fester in the dark. As Kepler's remnant and the station of Haven prepared to rejoin their journey, Kalen stood on the bridge, watching the combined forces of their two peoples working together. He had found more than just allies. He had found a missing piece of their soul. They were no longer just the last survivors of a dead world. They were the inheritors of a forgotten legacy, the rekindled fire of a humanity that had been suppressed but never truly extinguished. Their vengeance now had a name. It was not just retribution. It was reclamation. The fusion of Kepler's remnant and Haven was a messy, discordant, and beautiful thing. It was the clash of two long-lost branches of humanity, one shaped by the sterile, ordered hand of the architects, the other forged in the chaotic crucible of isolation and civil war. The survivors from the remnant were methodical, disciplined engineers of peace, now twisted into soldiers. The people of Haven were born warriors, their every instinct honed for conflict and survival in a closed, hostile environment. Fights broke out in the mess halls over rationing protocols. Engineers from both sides nearly came to blows over the integration of Haven's volatile fusion reactors with the remnant's stable geothermal core. Yet, beneath the friction, a powerful synergy was taking root. The people of Haven, with their centuries of ingrained martial tradition, began training the remnant survivors in close-quarters combat and small-unit tactics, turning them from a militia into a genuine fighting force. In return, the remnant scientists and doctors introduced advanced medical techniques and sustainable life support technologies that drastically improved the quality of life on the decaying station. They were healing each other, even as they prepared to unleash hell upon the galaxy. Kalen Vance and Mara stood as the two poles of this new, hybrid civilization. Kalen was the visionary, the strategist, the one who saw the grand, sweeping arc of their mission. Mara was the pragmatist, the tactician, her mind a sharp, brutal instrument focused on the bloody mathematics of the coming war. Their council meetings were often tense, a battle of wills between Kalen's calculated on long-term plans and Mara's aggressive with immediate solutions. "Your Legion thinks in probabilities," she argued during one heated debate, her hand resting on the hilt of the heavy kinetic pistol she always wore. "My Oracle thinks in kill chains. We need to be hitting their supply lines, their outer colonies, bleed them, weaken them before the final strike, and risk revealing our nature before we're in position." Kalen countered, his hands steepled before him. "We have one advantage. Mara surprise. The architects believe us dead and your people a forgotten myth. If we start launching raids, we sacrifice that advantage for a few minor victories. We become a known threat, a pirate fleet to be hunted. We need to remain a ghost, an existential threat they don't see coming until it's too late." It was Eris Thorne who brokered the compromise, her mind now a seamless blend of human intuition and the cold logic of the two AIs she commanded. She had become something more than human, a bridge between the two cultures, her body a testament to the fusion of old and new tech. "We can do both," she stated, her synthesized voice cutting through the argument. The central hologram in the war room shifted, displaying a swarm of small, insect-like drones. "Project Swarm," based on my original designs, but improved with Haven's manufacturing techniques. They're small, fast, and coated in our stealth material. We can launch them from thousands of light years away. They will travel through the void, self-replicating using interstellar dust and debris, growing from a handful into a plague. They will not attack military targets. They will attack the one thing the compact cannot function without its comms relays. The plan was brilliant in its simplicity. The Stellar Compact was a vast, sprawling empire held together by a network of quantum-entangled communication relays that allowed for instantaneous travel and information transfer. It was the nervous system of their civilization. Eris proposed to sever it, to plunge the architect's perfect, ordered galaxy into the Dark Ages. The attacks would be untraceable, attributed to stellar phenomena or equipment malfunction. The compact would be blinded, deafened, and paralyzed, its fleets unable to coordinate, its worlds isolated and terrified. It was a silent, insidious form of warfare, the kind of asymmetric strategy that could cripple an empire without firing a single shot. Mara's eyes lit up with a predatory gleam. Kalen nodded his slow, deliberate approval. The swarm was launched for the next 2 years. As their combined worldship and station fortress continued its inexorable journey, they watched the fruits of their labor. Reports, gathered by deep space probes, trickled in. A communications blackout in the Cygnus sector. FTL travel failures along the Perseus Arm. Entire colonies suddenly going silent. Their link to the compact severed. Panic and confusion began to ripple through the architect's serene empire. Trade routes collapsed. Supply ships vanished. Minor squabbles between vassal species, once easily mediated by the architects, escalated into open conflicts as the central authority went quiet. The galaxy was beginning to fray at the edges, and the architects, for all their wisdom, were blind to the cause. They attributed the failures to a cascading technological virus, a great silence that their best minds couldn't comprehend. They looked for an enemy they could fight, a fleet they could crush, never suspecting that their foe was a microscopic, self-replicating cancer eating away at their nervous system from within. During this time, Kalen's relationship with Jorik reached its inevitable breaking point. The old security chief saw the alliance with Haven not as a strengthening of their cause, but as the final death of their humanity. He watched the Remnant's children learning to field-strip projectile rifles and saw a future of endless war. He saw the cold, ruthless efficiency of the swarm attacks and mourned the chaos they were inflicting on billions of innocent lives across the galaxy. He confronted Kalen in the hydroponics bay, now a thriving garden thanks to the Remnant's technology. A pocket of defiant life in the heart of their war machine. "Look at this, Kalen," Yorick pleaded, gesturing to the vibrant green plants. "This is who we are. Builders, growers, not this. Don't you see what Mara and her people are turning us into? They never left their civil war. They've just drawn us into it. We're becoming the monsters we sought to destroy." "The architects are the monsters, Horik," Kalen said, his voice hard. "They forced our hand. Every comms relay we destroy, every system we isolate, saves lives in the long run. It prevents them from mounting a unified defense when we finally arrive. It is a necessary evil." "There is no such thing," Yorick roared, his face contorted with anguish. "There is only evil. You're justifying atrocities in the name of a vengeance that will consume us all. The man I knew, the administrator who wanted to protect his people, he died on Kepler's remnant. You're just a ghost, haunted by his anger." The words struck Kalen with the force of a physical blow. He saw a flicker of the truth in Jorik's desperate eyes, a glimpse of the abyss he was leading his people towards. But to turn back now was impossible. They were too far down the path. To stop now would be to render every sacrifice, every act of violence, meaningless. The final confrontation was not with words, but with actions. Auric, in a last, desperate attempt to stop the war, tried to smuggle a message out to warn the Compact. He used an old, shielded pre-compact comms buoy, a relic from Haven's archives, hoping to bypass Eris's surveillance. But he underestimated the Oracle. The old war mind, with its paranoid, predatory logic, had anticipated such a betrayal. Yorick was caught red-handed. The trial was short. Mara presided, her face like stone. The evidence was irrefutable. The sentence was death. Yorick stood before them, not begging for his life, but defiant to the end. "I am not the traitor here," he said, his voice ringing with a terrible clarity. "I am the last loyalist to the idea that humanity can be something better than its own rage. You can kill me, but you can't kill that truth." Kalen had the final say. The power of pardon rested with him. He looked at Yorick, his old friend, the conscience he had tried to ignore. He saw the faces of his people, the hard, expectant eyes of Mara's warriors, the cold, logical gaze of Eris. Pardoning Yorick would be seen as a weakness, a crack in the unified front they had built. It would sow dissent, threaten the entire mission. He thought of the 6 million dead on his world, of the condescending architect, of the leash that had been placed on his entire species. His heart hardened. "The sentence stands," Kalen said, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. "Carry it out." Yorick was executed by being spaced, an old, brutal tradition from Haven's past. Kalen watched on a monitor as his friend's form tumbled into the void, a final, silent protest against the darkness that had consumed them. That night, Kalen didn't sleep. He stood in the observation dome, staring out at the endless river of stars, and felt the full weight of what he had become. He had sacrificed his friend, his morality, his own soul, on the altar of his vengeance. Yorick's ghost would haunt him forever, a constant reminder of the price of his war. As they finally entered the outer edge of the Architect's home system, a system named Sanctum, the Great Silence had done its work, and the system was in disarray. The outer defense fleets were operating on outdated orders, unable to coordinate. The Central Command was broadcasting frantic, desperate hails into a dead network. Their enemy was deaf, dumb, and blind. Kepler's remnant, cloaked and silent, drifted past the disorganized patrol fleets like a phantom moon. Haven, attached to its dorsal side like a predatory wasp, was bristling with weapons, its crews on high alert. They had arrived. The final stage of their journey was about to begin. The hologram in the war room showed the system's star, a brilliant white sun, sent its third planet Xylos, the garden sanctuary. It was a jewel of green and blue, shimmering with life, protected by a powerful planetary shield. It was the world for which his own had been sacrificed. "The Oracle has cracked their defense protocol," Mara said, her voice a low growl of anticipation. "Their shield is still strong, but it has a flaw. It's designed to repel external attacks. It has no defense against a threat that simply appears inside it." Eris brought up a new schematic. "Legion has refined the gravitic drive. We can perform a micro jump, a short, instantaneous FTL jump. We will materialize in high orbit, inside the shield. The jump will shred our stealth coating, but by then, it won't matter." The plan was audacious, insane. It was a dagger strike at the throat. Kalen looked at the faces around him. Eris, her features a cold mask of chrome and focus. Mara, her eyes burning with a lifetime of suppressed rage. He thought of Jorik, and for a fleeting moment, he felt a wave of crushing doubt. Was this justice, or was it just a bigger, more elaborate act of murder? He pushed the thought away. It was too late for doubts. The ghosts of 6 million people were at his back, demanding retribution. He took a breath, the cold, recycled air filling his lungs, and gave the final command that would set the galaxy on fire. "Make the jump," he said, his voice a quiet, chilling whisper that sealed the fate of a world. It's time they reaped what they have sown. The universe tore apart and stitched itself back together in the space of a heartbeat. One moment, they were a ghost in the void. The next, they were a monster in the heart of Sanctum. Micro Jump was a violent, wrenching experience. A sensation of being turned inside out and squeezed through the eye of a needle. Alarms blared through the halls of Kepler's remnant and Haven as the stealth coding, shredded by the brutal physics of the jump, sloughed off the planet's surface like burnt skin. On the main view screen, the serene, azure jewel of Xylos filled the entire frame. So close they could almost touch it. They had arrived. For a stunned, silent second, there was no reaction from the world below. They hung in high orbit, a dead, scarred moon and its parasitic fortress that had appeared from nowhere, a violation of every known law of physics and warfare. Then, all hell broke loose. The Architect's defense systems, caught completely off guard, responded with a panicked, uncoordinated fury. Orbital platforms, designed to repel threats from the outer system, swiveled ponderously to engage a target that was already inside their kill box. A fleet of sleek, silver cruisers that had been on ceremonial patrol scrambled, their elegant forms breaking formation in disarray. It was the response of a security system trying to stop a bullet that was already in the brain. "They're trying to hail us," a communications tech shouted over the din. They're demanding to know who we are." Mara laughed, a harsh, grating sound that was full of a lifetime of hate. "Tell them we're the ghosts of their inconvenient truths," she snarled, then turned to her gunnery crews. "Open fire. All batteries. Scour them from the sky." Haven struck first. Its brutal, kinetic cannons, relics of a forgotten war, roared to life, spitting shells of super-dense alloys that tore through the elegant Architect cruisers like cannonballs through parchment. The silver ships shattered, their advanced shielding useless against the raw, kinetic force of a technology they had deemed primitive and obsolete. Kepler's remnant followed, but its weapon was not aimed at the fleet. On Kalen's command, the great aperture at the planet's north pole opened, and the geothermal core began to glow with the light of a captive star. The main weapon was charging. On the bridge, Kalen watched the battle unfold with a cold, detached calm. He was no longer a man. He was an instrument of a vengeance that had taken on a life of its own. He felt Jorik's ghost at his shoulder, whispering warnings he could no longer afford to hear. Below them, on the surface of Xylos, panic reigned. The Architects, a species that had not known true war in millennia, were watching their perfect sky burn. Their serene, placid existence was being torn apart by an enemy they couldn't comprehend, an enemy that shouldn't exist. "The main weapon is at full charge," Eris announced, her synthesized voice cutting through the chaos. Her face was a mask of cold, triumphant focus. "Ready to fire on your command, Kalen." Kalen looked at the verdant, beautiful world below. He saw its sprawling, crystalline cities, its lush, manicured forests, the shimmer of its perfectly blue oceans. He saw a world of peace, of art, of philosophy, and he saw the price tag for that peace, 6 million dead on a barren rock worlds away. He felt the weight of his promise to his people, the promise to reap a harvest from a dead world. He closed his eyes. Fire. The beam that erupted from Kepler's remnant was not a weapon. It was a judgment. It was a torrent of pure, incandescent energy, a focused piece of a star's heart that screamed across the short distance and slammed into Xylos. The planet's powerful shields, designed to stop fleets, flickered and died in less than a second, overloaded by a force they were never meant to withstand. The beam struck the ocean, and a plume of steam the size of a continent erupted into the sky, instantly boiling away a sea that had existed for eons. The beam carved a burning trench across a landmass, melting cities of crystal and light into slag, turning forests into ash, and cracking the planet's very crust. It was a surgical, horrifying act of planetary murder. They held the beam for 1 full minute, a minute that felt like an eternity. Kalen forced himself to watch, to bear witness to the horror he had unleashed. This was his vengeance. It was not glorious. It was not righteous. It was ugly, and it was absolute. When the beam finally cut off, Xylos was a ruin, a wounded, dying world, its surface shrouded in a thick, choking cloud of steam and superheated dust. The orbital defenses were silent, the remaining fleet scattered and broken, but their work was not done. "Mara," Kalen said, his voice a hoarse whisper, "send in your teams." Haven's dropships, filled with its grim, hardened warriors, descended into the chaos. Their mission was not conquest, it was decapitation. They struck at the central government archives, the primary command bunkers, the places where the architect leadership would be hiding. They were not there to take prisoners. The battle on the ground was short and brutal. The architects had no soldiers, only peacekeepers and philosophers, who were no match for Mara's seasoned killers. The fighting was over in hours. Kalen, Eris, and Mara landed in the ruins of the architect's capital city, and the air was thick with the smell of burnt ozone and vaporized life. Crystalline towers that had once pierced the clouds were now melted, skeletal stumps. The ground was a carpet of gray ash. They walked through the silent, dead city to the Grand Conclave, the heart of the Stellar Compact. In the main chamber, a handful of surviving architects, the highest-ranking members of their leadership, were waiting for them. Among them was Loricor, the envoy who had visited Kepler's remnant 5 years ago. His silver robes were tattered and scorched, his serene, placid face now a mask of utter shock and disbelief. He stared at Kalen as if seeing a ghost. "You," he whispered, his melodic voice trembling. "How you underestimated the grief of your younger members," Kalen said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. He felt nothing, no triumph, no satisfaction, just a vast, cold emptiness. "We didn't just survive. We remembered. We built. And now we are here to collect the debt." Loricor looked at the devastation around him, at the ashes of his civilization. "You have doomed yourselves," he rasped. "You have become the monsters you claim to fight. The galaxy will never forgive this. You will be hunted to extinction." Mara stepped forward, drawing her heavy pistol. "The galaxy is a different place now. Architect," she said, her voice a low growl. "Its leash is broken." But before she could fire, Kalen held up a hand. "No," he said. "Death is too easy. They don't get the honor of martyrdom." He turned his cold gaze on Loricor and the surviving architects. You will not be killed. You will be witnesses. You will be scattered to the far corners of the galaxy, to the worlds of the species you once ruled. You will live out your long lives as a reminder, a living testament to the price of arrogance. You will tell the story of Kepler's remnant. You will teach them the meaning of the word humanity. It was a fate worse than death, to be stripped of their power, their prestige, their home, and forced to live as relics, as warnings. In the weeks that followed, the new reality of the galaxy began to set in. The fall of Xylos and the breaking of the compact sent a shockwave through every known world. There was no longer a central authority. The old order was dead. Some systems descended into chaos, falling into the hands of warlords and pirates. Others, inspired by humanity's defiant act, declared their independence and began to forge new alliances. The galaxy was fractured, chaotic, and for the first time in centuries, free. Humanity became a legend, a whispered name that invoked both fear and awe. The survivors of Kepler's remnant and Haven did not build an empire. They had no interest in ruling. They had accomplished their mission. Their great world ship, their home and their weapon, turned its back on the galaxy they had shattered and sailed once more into the deep void, seeking a new, uncharted star to call their own. Kalen Vance stood on the observation deck, watching the stars drift by. His war was over. His promise was kept. He had his vengeance, but he had lost his soul in the process. He was the leader who had saved his people by turning them into a weapon, the man who had freed the galaxy by burning a world. He would forever be haunted by the ghost of Jorik, by the ashes of Xylos, by the cold, empty victory he had achieved. Eris came to stand beside him. More of her was machine now than ever before. She had fully integrated with Legion and the Oracle, becoming something new, a transcendent being of logic and data. The calculations are complete, she said, her voice a calm, neutral hum. We have found a suitable G-class star in an uncharted nebula. We can be there in 3 generations. We can build a new home. We can begin again. Kalen looked at her, at the being who had been his partner in destruction. Can we? Eris, he asked quietly. After what we've done, after what we've become, can we ever truly build anything but weapons again? Eris was silent for a moment. Then, for the first time in years, a flicker of the human woman she had once been appeared in her one remaining organic eye. We are survivors. Kalen, she said softly, it's what we do. We endure. We adapt. And perhaps, in time, we can even learn to forgive ourselves. Kalen didn't answer. He just stared into the deep, endless night, a lonely king on a throne of ashes, leading his people toward a future he had both saved and damned. The beast had its revenge, but the man was left to live with the scars. Humanity was free, but the price of that freedom was a memory that would burn in the heart of the galaxy for 1,000 years to come.